The Sunday air hung thick and hot in my parents' attic, smelling of brittle paper and dead insects. I hated this. Hated giving up my one day off to sift through 40 years of accumulated junk, just so some real estate agent could list the house. My dad's hip was shot, and my mom saw sentimental value in every dust-covered knickknack. So here I was, sweating through my t-shirt under the glare of a single, naked bulb. "Just get it done, Nate," I muttered, kicking at a stack of yellowed newspapers. The sound was flat, absorbed by the clutter. I was wrestling with a tower of cardboard boxes when my foot hit something solid. "Not cardboard. Wood," I grunted, heaving the boxes aside. It was a small, dark-stained wooden chest, no bigger than a shoebox, with a simple brass latch. I didn't recognize it. Curiosity, a welcome break from the grinding boredom, made me kneel. The floorboards groaned in protest. The latch was stiff. I had to pry it open with my car key. It gave way with a tired creak. Inside, nestled on a bed of what looked like old yellowed cotton, lay a marionette. Its wooden body was jointed at the knees, elbows, and neck. The paint on its face was chipped, but I could make out two wide, black button eyes and a simple, thin red line for a smile. A tangle of black strings led up from its limbs to a wooden cross handle. I recognized it then. A faint, blurry memory. It was the only toy I could recall from before we moved to this house when I was 5. I couldn't remember its name. I couldn't even remember playing with it, but I knew it was mine. I picked it up. The wood was smooth, cool against my sweaty palm. The limbs dangled lifelessly. As I lifted it into the weak light, a sound brushed past my ear. A high, faint giggle. I froze. My head snapped up, searching the shadowy corners of the attic. Nothing. Just the oppressive heat, and the drone of a fly, buzzing somewhere near the single small window. I lowered the puppet, my brow furrowed. It must have been the house settling. A floorboard creaking upstairs had probably sounded like that. Or maybe my own ears, ringing from the heat. I was just tired. I tossed the puppet back into the box. It landed on its back with a light clatter of wood against wood. I didn't have time for this. I slammed the lid shut and turned back to a leaning tower of what looked like old college textbooks. I worked for maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10, the rhythm of lifting and stacking, pushing the strange moment from my mind. The sweat dripped from my nose onto a dusty copy of some economics tome. I decided that was enough for one trip. I'd take this stack and the wooden box down. When I turned back, my breath caught in my throat. The lid of the chest was open. Just a crack, maybe 2 inches. And inside, the marionette was no longer lying on its back. It was sitting bolt upright. Its wooden head was tilted, the painted black eyes aimed directly at me. "What the?" My voice was a low whisper. My heart gave a hard, painful thump against my ribs. That wasn't right. I walked toward it slowly, my boots light on the dusty floorboards. I must have not closed it properly. The latch didn't catch. The lid was probably warped from the heat, and it sprang open. The jolt must have been just right to knock the puppet into a sitting position. It had to be. That was the only explanation. I stared at it. The simple red line of its mouth seemed wider now, mocking. The angle of its head was too deliberate, too knowing. A cold trickle of sweat traced a path down my spine, entirely different from the sweat caused by the heat. Enough. I was letting this place get to me. I reached out, my hand hovering over the box, intending to just grab the whole damned thing and get out. The instant my fingertips brushed the rough grain of the wood, it happened. Whump. The heavy trapdoor to the attic slammed shut. The sound was a physical blow, a concussive force that shook the floor under my feet. The single bulb flickered once, then went out. Total darkness swallowed everything. A thick cloud of disturbed dust filled my lungs, and I erupted into a fit of coughing, stumbling backward, my hands flailing in the black. Then came the second sound. It was small, but it cut through the echo of the slam with chilling finality. Click. The sound of the metal slide bolt on the other side of the door. From the outside. My heart stopped. The coughing died in my throat. "Hey!" I yelled, my voice cracking. I scrambled on my hands and knees across the floor, the splinters digging into my palms. My hands found the trapdoor. It was solid, unmoving. I pushed. Nothing. I balled my fist and hammered on the thick wood. Son of a bitch! Who's out there? This isn't funny! Open the door! My own shouting was the only reply. It echoed back at me, deadened by the piles of garbage surrounding me. My parents weren't home. They'd left an hour ago for a doctor's appointment. No one was here. I pounded again, screaming until my throat was raw. Let me out! God damn it, open the door! Useless. It was completely useless. I slumped against the door, my forehead pressed to the wood. My breathing came in ragged, panicked gasps. The air was thick with the smell of old decay. Silence pressed in on me, a heavy blanket. The only sound was the frantic drumming of blood in my ears. I forced myself to be quiet, to listen. I held my breath, straining my ears against the pounding in my own skull. And then I heard it. Outside the door, a soft, shuffling sound on the wooden floor of the hallway. Scuff, scuff, patter. Too light for an adult. Too light even for a child. It was the sound of something small, being dragged. The sound moved from left to right, then stopped, directly over the trap door where I was crouched beneath. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. A drawn-out, heavy pause that stretched for an eternity. I was a statue, every muscle locked. I didn't dare breathe. I could feel the individual beads of sweat forming on my forehead, in the space between my shoulder blades. My eyes were wide open in the pitch black, seeing nothing but dancing phantoms of light. Then the giggle came. It wasn't outside the door this time. It wasn't faint. It was right beside my ear. A high-pitched, childish titter, as clear and as close as if someone was leaning over my shoulder in the dark. A scream tore itself from my lungs, a sound of pure animal terror. I didn't think. I didn't plan. My body reacted on its own. I launched myself away from the door, scrambled into a crouch, then charged, putting every ounce of my weight and panic-fueled strength into my shoulder. I hit the trapdoor like a battering ram. There was a crack of splintering wood. The bolt on the other side ripped free from its housing with a screech of tearing metal. The door flew open. I went with it, tumbling out of the darkness and crashing onto the floor of the second-story hallway. Light. Blinding, beautiful light from the hallway window flooded my vision. I landed hard on my side, the wind knocked out of me. I gasped for air, scrambling to get up, my limbs tangled. I pushed myself onto my feet, my back against the wall, my eyes darting frantically in every direction. The hallway was empty. Completely. The door to my parents' bedroom was closed. The door to my old room was ajar. The stairs leading down were silent. There was nothing. No one. No sound but my own harsh, ragged breathing. My mind reeled. It couldn't be. I heard it. I heard the footsteps. I heard the lock. I heard the laugh. My eyes fell to the trap door I had just burst through. It lay askew, one hinge broken. The top of it, the side that faced the hallway, was coated in a thick, uniform layer of pale gray dust, undisturbed for years. Except for one spot, right next to the mangled hole where the slide bolt had been ripped out, there was a mark. It wasn't a smudge or a scuff from my fall. It was a handprint. Perfectly clear. 5 tiny, distinct finger marks and the small pad of a thumb, pressed firmly into the dust. A fresh print. The hand of a small child. The drive home was a blur of traffic lights and the low hum of the engine. I didn't turn on the radio. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. My reflection in the rearview mirror was a stranger, slick with sweat, eyes too wide. I kept seeing the handprint in the dust, 5 small fingers, the size of mine when I was 5. Back in my apartment, the air was cool and still. I set the deadbolt. The slide of the metal was a small, satisfying sound. I walked into the living room and dropped the wooden chest onto the floor in a corner. It landed with a dull thud on the cheap area rug. I didn't want to look at it. I didn't want it in my home. But the thought of carrying it back down to the car, of touching it again, made the skin on my arms crawl. Tomorrow. I'd deal with it tomorrow. I peeled off my sweat-soaked t-shirt and went straight to the kitchen. I pulled a bottle of water from the fridge and drank half of it standing there, the cold liquid doing nothing to quench the fire in my throat. My hands were shaking. I told myself it was the heat. Dehydration. The stress of cleaning out that damn attic. It was anything but the truth. To hell with it. I went to the living room, grabbed the remote, and turned on the TV. The noise of a mindless sitcom filled the apartment, a wall of canned laughter to push back the silence. I sat on the couch, put my feet up on the coffee table, and took another long drink of water. I set the glass down on the dark wood of the table, a few inches from a stack of magazines. The condensation immediately formed a perfect ring. I focused on the screen, on the bright colors and the stupid jokes. Anything to not think about the sound of a bolt sliding shut from the outside. I must have stared at the screen for 20 minutes. The sitcom ended and a commercial for a car dealership came on. A man in a cheap suit was shouting about interest rates. My eyes drifted from the screen to the living room. The fading daylight from the window cast long shadows. My gaze landed on the glass of water. It moved. It wasn't a big movement, not a jolt. It was a slow, smooth slide. A single inch across the polished surface of the table, away from the magazines and closer to the edge where I sat. It stopped. The water inside sloshed gently. My breath hitched. I sat perfectly still, my eyes locked on the glass. Had I imagined it? Maybe I bumped the table when I put my feet up. A delayed reaction. Or, the floor wasn't perfectly level. A vibration from the building. There were a dozen logical reasons. I leaned forward, slowly, and pushed the glass back to its original spot. The wet ring it left behind was proof. It had been there. Now it was here. My own hand felt clammy as I set it back down. I stared at it, waiting. It didn't move again. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. A truck must have passed on the street below. That was all. The hours bled into one another. I ordered a pizza I barely tasted and watched 2 movies back to back. The wooden chest sat in the corner, a dark, silent shape in my peripheral vision. I refused to look at it directly. By the time I finally turned the TV off, the apartment was pitch black except for the orange glow of the city filtering through the blinds. I didn't turn on a light. I navigated the familiar path to my bedroom, undressed in the dark, and fell into bed. Sleep came, but it was a thin, dreamless thing that offered no rest. I woke up because of an itch. It was a persistent, irritating sensation between my shoulder blades, right in that spot I couldn't quite reach. I grunted, twisting and arching my back, trying to rub it against the mattress. It didn't help. The itch felt deep, a sharp, burning tingle under the skin. Annoyed, I threw back the covers and swung my legs out of bed. The floor was cold under my bare feet. I shuffled towards the bathroom, rubbing my eyes, my only thought getting some lotion to stop the damn irritation. I flicked on the light. The sudden brightness made me squint. I turned my back to the mirror over the sink, craning my neck to try and see the spot. I couldn't get a good angle. I fumbled for my phone on the counter, switched on the camera and held it over my shoulder. The image on the screen made the air freeze in my lungs. It wasn't a rash. It wasn't a bug bite. There were 3 lines carved into the skin of my back. They ran parallel to each other, starting from just below my right shoulder blade and dragging downward for a good 6 inches. They were a raw, angry red, the skin broken and raised. In a few places, tiny dark beads of blood had welled up on the surface. They were clean, deliberate marks, like someone had taken a small rake and dragged it with force down my back. Like fingernails. Long, sharp fingernails. What the hell? The words were a whisper. My own voice sounded foreign. I stood there, staring at the screen, my mind refusing to process what my eyes were seeing. I lived alone. The deadbolt was on all night. No one had been in here. I couldn't have done this to myself. My own fingernails were clipped short, chewed down to the quick. I couldn't have reached that spot with that much force, not even in the most violent nightmare. I touched the marks gingerly with my fingertips. The skin was hot and stung sharply. It was real. This was real. A coldness that had nothing to do with the tiled floor started deep in my gut and spread outwards, a tide of pure dread. I backed out of the bathroom, my eyes darting around my own apartment as if seeing it for the first time. The familiar shadows now seemed to hold shape, to breathe. My gaze fell on the doorway to the living room, on the corner I had thrown the box. It had to go. Now. Not tomorrow. Now. My decision was instant, a chemical reaction in my blood. Fear had turned to something else. A desperate need for action. I marched back into the bedroom, my heart hammering against my ribs. The light from the bathroom cast a pale stripe across the floor. I looked toward the corner of the living room. The box was there, a dark square. Motionless. I was 3 feet from it when my phone, still clutched in my hand, lit up. It vibrated. A sudden buzz against my palm that made me jump. A notification banner glowed on the screen. A new text message. From an unknown number. My thumb hovered over the notification. My blood ran cold. I knew, with a certainty that defied all logic, what this was. I tapped the screen. The message app opened. One line of text. "You can't throw me away." Time stopped. The sound of my own blood roared in my ears. I lifted my head, slowly, from the phone screen to the box in the corner. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. And I saw it. I swear to God I saw it. The wooden head of the marionette, barely visible in the gloom inside the chest, shifted. A tiny, almost imperceptible turn. A quarter of an inch, its painted black eyes aligning with mine. Something inside me snapped. The low hum of fear that had been building all day erupted into a wave of pure, hot rage. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was violation. This thing, whatever it was in my home. It was touching me. It was in my phone. "Who the hell are you?" The shout tore out of me, raw and loud in the silent apartment. I didn't think. I lunged. I covered the last few feet in a single stride and grabbed the wooden puppet. My fingers closed around its torso, my only intention to smash it into 1,000 splinters against the nearest wall. The second my skin made contact, pain exploded in my hand. It was a blinding, electric shock, a white-hot agony that shot up my arm to my shoulder. It felt like I had plunged my hand into a box of scorching hot glass shards. A scream ripped from my throat, a sound of animal pain, and I recoiled, dropping the puppet. It hit the rug with a soft, unremarkable clatter. The room was suddenly freezing. The air was frigid, biting at my exposed skin. I stumbled back, clutching my hand to my chest, my breath coming in ragged sobs. I stared at the thing on the floor. It was just a puppet. A cheap wooden toy, lying inert on its side. Its string limbs were tangled. Its painted smile was stupid and simple. There was nothing there. Nothing. My hand throbbed. A deep, pulsing torment. I risked a look. I uncurled my fingers, expecting to see them sliced open, bleeding from the phantom glass. There were no large cuts. Instead, I watched, my mind reeling, as thin red lines began to appear on my palm. They weren't there a second ago. They were etching themselves into my skin, right before my eyes, as if drawn by an invisible needle. They bloomed from pale pink to a sharp, vivid red, welling up with blood. They were small, precise. The lines connected, they crossed, they curved. They were forming a letter. A single, stark letter, scratched into the flesh of my own hand. K. And then, the name, buried for 30 years under layers of time and willful forgetting, surfaced from the black depths of my memory, with the force of a body rising from a frozen lake. Clinker. I did not sleep. The word itself felt like a joke. I lay on top of the covers, the lights on, and watched the ceiling. The letter K burned in my palm, a dull, aching throb that pulsed in time with my heart. My back was a field of fire where the scratches were. Clinker. The name was a key, and it had unlocked a room in my head I had sealed with cement, and 30 years of silence. It echoed. It rattled. It wouldn't leave. When the gray light of morning finally seeped through the blinds, it offered no relief. It just illuminated the dust motes dancing in the air, and the mess of my life. My body moved on its own, a machine running on fumes. I swung my legs off the bed. My feet were cold on the wood floor. I went to the kitchen. I turned on the coffee maker. The gurgle and hiss of the machine was the only sound. My hand still hurt. I held it under the tap, letting cold water run over the raw mark. It didn't wash away. The skin was puckered and red. The initial lines of blood now scabbed over into a rough, dark letter. A brand. I needed to get out. I needed air. I needed to be somewhere with 1,000 other people so I couldn't be alone. Work. I would go to work. I would sit at my desk and pretend the world was normal. The coffee was done. I poured a cup, my hand shaking so badly that black liquid sloshed onto the counter. I didn't wipe it up. On my way to the shower, I took my car keys from my pocket and set them on the small butcher block island in the center of the kitchen. The jangle of metal on wood was a definite, solid sound. I saw them there. A silver ring, 2 keys, and a cheap plastic fob from the dealership. The shower was hot. Steam filled the small room quickly. I stood under the spray with my eyes closed, trying to let the water wash away more than just the grime and the sweat. I scrubbed my skin until it was red. I tried to focus on the simple, physical act, the smell of the soap, the pressure of the water on my shoulders. I did not look at the scratches on my back in the fogged-up mirror. I already knew they were there. I could feel them. I dressed in the humid air of the bathroom. T-shirt, jeans. The routine felt foreign, like I was watching someone else do it. I walked back into the kitchen, my wet hair dripping onto my collar. I reached for my keys. They were not there. The butcher block was empty except for the dark, cooling puddle of spilled coffee. I stared at the spot. I had put them right there. I had heard the sound. I had seen them. Shit, I muttered. My voice was a dry rasp. I patted my pockets. Nothing. I checked the counter next to the sink, the top of the fridge. I went back to the bedroom, throwing aside the rumpled clothes from yesterday. Not there. I looked under the bed. I pulled the cushions off the couch in the living room, my search growing more frantic. My breath was coming in short, sharp bursts. Come on, I know I put them on the counter. I was talking to myself. The sound of my own voice was thin in the large room. I looked everywhere, in the fruit bowl, in the junk drawer, rummaging through old batteries and rubber bands. 10 minutes I searched. 10 minutes of rising heat in my chest. A frantic, desperate energy that was close to screaming. I gave up. Fine. I would walk. The bus stop was only 6 blocks away. It was better than being in here anyway. I grabbed my wallet from the dish by the door and turned to leave. My path took me past the corner of the living room. The corner where the chest sat, I stopped. My heart didn't just drop. It ceased to exist for a full second. My keys were hanging from the upturned hand of the marionette. Clinker was sitting upright on the lid of the wooden chest, its legs dangling over the side. One of its jointed wooden hands was raised, palm up. And from its index finger, a single smooth piece of painted wood hung my keychain. It swayed slightly in a draft I couldn't feel. It hadn't been sitting up before. It had been lying in a heap on the rug where I dropped it. I did not move it. I did not put the keys there. There were no other explanations, no water pipes vibrating, no trucks passing on the street. This was a direct statement. An action. A voice without sound. It was playing with me. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I backed away slowly, my eyes locked on the puppet. Its painted black smile seemed wider now. Its 2 black dot eyes seemed to follow me as I fumbled for the deadbolt and stumbled out into the hallway, slamming the door behind me. I didn't take the keys. It could keep them. The world outside felt wrong. The sun was too bright. The sound of traffic was too loud. I felt exposed, like everyone on the street could see the K on my hand, could see the terror plastered on my face. At the office, I was useless. I stared at my computer screen, the words and numbers blurring into meaningless shapes. I drank 3 cups of coffee that did nothing but make my hands tremble more. At 11 a.m., my desk phone rang. The sound made me jolt so hard I knocked over a stack of papers. The caller ID said it was Mark, from accounting. I let it ring 3 times before picking it up. Alex, I said. Hey, Alex, Mark. Weird question for you. His voice was hesitant. You okay, man? You sent a pretty strange email to the whole department last night. The blood drained from my face. What are you talking about? I didn't send any emails last night. You sure? Came from your address, around 3 in the morning. The subject line was just a secret. My hands felt numb. I clicked my mouse, my movements stiff and jerky. I opened my email client. I clicked on the Sent Items folder. There it was. Sent at 3:17 a.m. to accounting_all. Subject, a secret. My fingers shook as I clicked to open it. The body of the email was one long paragraph. It described, in meticulous detail, how I had cheated on my final corporate finance exam in university. How I'd written key formulas on the inside of a water bottle label. A stupid, desperate thing I had done over a decade ago. A secret that I had never told a single living soul. A secret I had almost managed to forget myself. Alex, you there? Mark's voice was a distant buzz in my ear, a sound whispered right next to my head. It was as close as my own breath, a dry, papery rustle of a voice. I was just helping you share. A guttural sound tore from my chest. I didn't even recognize it as my own voice. I threw the phone receiver. It slammed against the cubicle wall with a crack of plastic and dangled from its cord. People in the neighboring cubicles looked up, their faces masks of alarm. I didn't see them. I shoved my chair back, the legs screaming against the floor, and I ran. I pushed past the front desk, past the security guard, and out onto the street. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs felt like lead. I ended up in my apartment. I don't know how I got back. The next thing I knew, I was locking the deadbolt, my back pressed against the door, my chest heaving. The apartment was just as I had left it. Silent. The chest was in the corner. The puppet was still sitting on top of it. The keys were gone from its finger. I slid down the door until I was sitting on the floor. I wrapped my arms around my knees and buried my face against them. I had to make it stop. You can't throw me away. The voice wasn't a whisper next to my ear anymore. It was inside my skull. It echoed in the hollow spaces behind my eyes. We had so much fun. Don't you remember? Shut up, I whispered into the denim of my jeans. Leave me alone. K-H-I-K-K, H-I-K-K, H-I-K. The sound of a giggle. Not a child's giggle. It sounded like small, dry sticks rubbing together. But you know what you did. You can't run from what you did. I scrambled into the corner of the entryway, pressing myself into the angle of the walls as if I could somehow merge with them. I clamped my hands over my ears, pushing until it hurt. It didn't block out the sound. The voice was inside me. It was me. She never told anyone. Because you made sure she couldn't. K-H-I-K-K-H-I-K. No! I screamed it this time, my throat raw. I looked up, wild-eyed, across the living room at the thing in the corner. The puppet. It sat there, motionless. A thing of wood and string and paint. But its eyes, those two black, polished dots, were drilled into me. They weren't just looking at me. They were looking through me, past the skin and bone, and into the black, rotten place in my memory that I had tried so hard to wall off. The place where the real secret was buried. I lurched to my feet. A blind animal panic took over. I needed to wash it off. Wash the voice out. I stumbled into the bathroom and twisted the cold tap, the water blasting into the porcelain sink. I bent over and shoved my face into the stream, gulping down water, splashing it all over my head and neck. It was cold. It was real. It was something to hold on to. I gasped, water dripping from my chin, and straightened up. I looked in the mirror. My own face stared back. Pale. Soaked. Eyes wide with a terror that didn't look human, but as I watched, the face in the glass shifted. The lines of age and exhaustion faded. The jaw softened. The eyes widened, not with terror, but with something else. Guilt. The reflection was me, but it was the face of a 5-year-old boy. His hair was plastered to his forehead. His lip trembled. And then, another shape faded into view in the mirror behind the boy. It was Clinker. Its wooden head was right next to my younger self's. Its painted smile was a bright fixed gash in the reflection. And its arm, a jointed stick of wood held together by string, was draped over the little boy's shoulder in a gesture of close, dark friendship. The boy and the puppet, staring out of the mirror. Two conspirators sharing a secret, reflected back at the man who was screaming on the inside. The reflection in the mirror was a stranger's. My face, but hollowed out. Eyes that had seen too much, set in skin stretched tight over the bone. The little boy and the puppet were gone. There was only me. And the memory. And the voice inside my head that was not my own. I needed it to stop. The thought was a singular point of light in a universe of black static. I needed a professional, someone who dealt in broken minds. The next day, I found a doctor's name online. Dr. Anya Sharma. Her office was in a clean, beige building that smelled of air freshener and old paper. I sat on a plush chair that was too soft. I told her I was under a lot of stress from work. I told her I was having trouble sleeping. I told her I was anxious. I used simple, clean words, the kind of words you use for problems that can be solved. I did not tell her about Clinker. I did not tell her about the K branded on my palm. I did not tell her about the whispers. To say those things out loud would be to make them real in a way I couldn't take back. Here, in this sterile room, they were still my secret. A disease I could hide. She was kind. She nodded, her pen making small, neat scratches on a notepad. She didn't pry. She didn't ask the questions I was afraid of. She told me my symptoms were common. She prescribed a light sedative. "Just to help you get some rest, to break the cycle," she said, her voice smooth. "Come back in 2 weeks." I left with a small white paper bag from the pharmacy. That night I filled a glass with water. I shook one small blue pill into my palm. It felt impossibly light. A tiny key to a quiet room. I swallowed it. I stood in the kitchen, waiting for the silence to come. My eyes fell on the knife block, the big chef's knife, its handle worn smooth from use. I thought of the keys hanging from the puppet's finger. I thought of the email. I pulled the knife from its slot. The weight was solid in my hand. The edge of the blade caught the overhead light. I opened the junk drawer, the one filled with takeout menus and dead batteries, and I slid the knife inside, beneath a tangle of old charging cables. The sound of the drawer closing was definite, a small act of control. I went to the living room and lay down on the sofa. I didn't want to be in the bedroom. The chest was in the corner of the living room, but with my back to it, I could pretend it wasn't there. The pill worked its way through my system. The sharp edges of my thoughts began to soften. The constant thrum of fear receded, replaced by a thick, heavy fog. For the first time in days, my body felt like it belonged to me. My last thought before the darkness took me was a simple one. Quiet. I woke to the sound of cheerful, tinny music. My head was thick, my mouth dry. I was still on the sofa. My neck was stiff. The sun was streaming through the windows, dust motes dancing in the beams. On the television, a cartoon rabbit was outsmarting a coyote. The colors were bright, oversaturated. I didn't remember turning it on. I pushed myself up. My body felt heavy, used. A low-grade headache pulsed behind my eyes. I walked to the kitchen to get a glass of water. The room was bright with morning light. And on the wooden cutting board, in the center of the butcher block island, sat the chef's knife. It was not in the drawer. It was lying flat on the board. Its blade was clean, but next to it was an apple, or what was left of one. It wasn't sliced. It was mangled, hacked into messy, wet chunks. The white flesh was already turning brown where it was exposed to the air. Deep gouges showed where the point of the knife had been stabbed into it, over and over. A brutal, senseless violation of a piece of fruit. I stared at it. I could feel my heart start to beat faster, a frantic drum against the dull throb in my head. I must have done it. The pill. It must have made me sleepwalk. That was the only explanation. I must have gotten up, turned on the TV, taken the knife out, and mutilated an apple. I told myself this, repeating the words in my head. I must have. I sleepwalked. It was a reasonable, logical sequence of events. But the feeling in my gut wasn't reasonable. It was a cold, coiling thing that knew better. A sharp, hard knock on my front door made me flinch so violently I nearly dropped my glass. It wasn't a friendly knock. It was firm, official. My mind raced. Work. They must have fired me over the email. I walked to the door, my feet feeling unsteady on the floor. I looked through the peephole. 2 police officers. 1 man, 1 woman. Their faces were impassive. My blood went cold. I fumbled with the locks and opened the door a few inches. "Alex Evans?" the male officer asked. He was older, with a tired look around his eyes. "Yes," my voice was thin. "We'd like to ask you a few questions. Mind if we step in?" I opened the door wider, and they came into the entryway. They saw the living room, the hacked-up apple on the counter. The female officer's eyes lingered on it for a second. "Is there a problem, officers?" "We had a complaint from one of your neighbors," the man said, not looking at me but around the apartment. "Mr. Henderson, apartment 4B. Henderson." Of course. A miserable old man who complained about everything. My music being too loud. My footsteps in the hall. The smell of my cooking. We'd had a few sharp exchanges. "He claims that sometime last night," the officer continued, "all 4 of his tires were slashed. Furthermore, someone spray-painted a message on his door." "What kind of message?" I asked, my throat tightening. The officer looked at me then, his gaze leveled and hard. It said, "I know what you did," in red paint. You have any idea who might do something like that, Mr. Evans? No, I was here all night. My heart was a hammer against my ribs. I took a sleeping pill. I was asleep on the couch until just a few minutes ago. You slept so soundly, a voice whispered, right inside my skull. It was the dry, rustling sound of clinker. While I went out to play. K-H-I-K-K-K-H-I-K-K-K-H-I-K. I must have made a sound, a small choke, because the female officer took a half step forward. Are you all right, sir? Fine, I croaked. I'm fine. I didn't do anything. The thing is, the male officer said, his tone casual. This building has security cameras in the hallway. We've already spoken to the building manager. He's waiting for us downstairs in the security office to review the footage from last night. We'd like you to come with us. It wasn't a request. The walk down the hall and into the elevator was the longest journey of my life. The officers were silent. I could feel their presence behind me, a heavy, watchful weight. My own breathing was loud in my ears. The security office was a small, windowless room in the basement. It smelled of stale coffee. The security guard, a heavy man named Dave, was sitting in front of a bank of monitors. Got it queued up for you, Dave said, not taking his eyes off the screen. The male officer nodded at me. Just stand here, please, Mr. Evans. Dave pressed a key. A black and white image flickered to life. It was the view from the camera at the end of our hallway. The timestamp in the corner read 2:47 a.m. The hallway was empty, washed out in the infrared light. Then, a door opened. My door. A figure slipped out. They were wearing a dark, hooded sweatshirt with the hood pulled up low, obscuring their face. The figure moved quickly, almost furtively down the hall to Henderson's door. I held my breath. My chest was so tight I thought it would break. On the screen, the figure pulled a can from their pocket. They shook it. I couldn't hear the rattle of the ball bearing inside, but I could imagine it. They sprayed messy red letters onto the white door. Then they knelt, and something glinted in their hand. They moved from one tire to the next on Henderson's mobility scooter that he always left parked outside his apartment. A quick, savage punching motion at each one. The figure stood up. They were done. For a second, they just stood there, looking at their work. Then, slowly, they turned. They looked right up at the security camera. The face was lost in the deep shadow of the hood, a black void. But there was no mistaking the slump of the shoulders, the way they held their body, the dark-colored hoodie I wore whenever it got cold. That was my hoodie. That was my posture. That was me. I felt the blood leave my face. The room tilted. See? The voice was triumphant in my head. We had fun. Mr. Evans? The female officer's voice cut through the fog. Both officers were looking at me. Their expressions were no longer neutral. They were cold, certain. Dave, the security guard, was swiveling in his chair to stare. My mouth opened, but no words came out. My entire defense, I was asleep, I was innocent, had just been obliterated by a silent movie starring myself. A wave of dizziness washed over me. I put a hand out to steady myself against the edge of the console. My hand. My right hand. The one branded with the letter K. My eyes focused on my fingernails. And I saw it. Under the nail of my right index finger, there was a tiny, brilliant fleck of crimson. Another faint smear was caked into the cuticle of my thumb. Dried. The exact same color as the paint on Henderson's door. The physical proof. The final, damning seal on a nightmare I didn't even know I had authored. The room was silent, but in my head a dry, wooden giggle echoed on and on and on. The officers didn't put me in cuffs. They didn't have to. The walk back to my apartment was a silent procession with me as the condemned, them as the patient executioners. They had the tape, they had my face, my hoodie. They had the paint under my nails. They told me they were waiting on a warrant. They said not to go anywhere. The words were a leash, and the door to my apartment closing behind me was the click of the lock on my cage. The air inside was thick and used. The smell of the mangled apple on the butcher block was cloying, a sweet odor of decay. My eyes were drawn to the corner, to the wooden chest, to him. I walked over to it, my feet heavy, each step an effort. I knelt. My hands shook as I undid the latches. The lid creaked open. Clinker sat inside, nestled in the dark. His painted smile was a fixed, knowing gash in the dim light. His glass eyes seemed to watch me, full of a secret glee. I stared at him. The video played on a loop in my head. The hooded figure, the spray can, the knife, the turn to the camera. Me. It was me. But I was asleep. I was here, on the couch, dead to the world. Why? The word was a crack in my throat. I cleared it, tried again. My voice came out loud, raw in the quiet room. Why are you doing this? I was talking to a puppet, a block of wood and string. You're ruining my life. They're going to arrest me. They're going to put me away. I reached in, my fingers closing around the puppet's hard wooden body. I pulled him out of the chest and set him on the floor in front of me. He slumped against the wall, head lolling to one side. A toy. Just a toy. But the paint under my nails was real. Henderson's tires were real. Why are you trying to destroy me? I yelled, my voice echoing off the bare walls. I slammed my fist on the floor next to him. The impact sent a sharp pain up my arm. Answer me! That old man deserved it. The voice wasn't a whisper anymore. It wasn't a rustle of dry leaves. It was a thought, fully formed, spoken in my own mind with an unnerving clarity. It was calm. Reasonable. He's always yelling at you, Alex. Always complaining. Making you feel small. I was just protecting you. I was standing up for us. Just like old times. Remember? The words landed like ice water down my spine. Just like old times. A door in my mind, one I didn't know existed, creaked open. A flicker of an image. Bright green summer leaves against a deep blue sky. The smell of cut grass and warm, dusty wood. The rough feel of a rope ladder under my small hands. I shook my head, trying to dislodge the feeling. What are you talking about? There were no old times. Oh, but there were, the voice continued, patient and smooth. The tree house. Remember the tree house your dad built? The one behind the old shed? I remembered. A small, crooked box of plywood, nailed high up in the branches of the big oak tree. My hideout. My kingdom. And you weren't always alone up there, were you, Alex? Another image surfaced. A boy. A face I hadn't seen in 25 years. Freckles across his nose. A gap between his two front teeth. Aaron. His name was Aaron. He lived down the street. We were friends. For one summer. The memories solidified. Aaron was in the treehouse with me. The sun was hot. We were arguing. My hands were balled into fists. What were we fighting about? A toy. A shiny red metal robot. He had just gotten it for his birthday. It was the only thing I wanted in the world. He wouldn't let me play with it. He held it up, taunting me. It's mine, he'd said, his gapped-toothed smile infuriating. You can't have it. He was mean, Clinker's voice said, a soothing justification. He cornered you. He wouldn't share. He said you were poor. He said your dad was a drunk. Did he say that? I couldn't remember. But the anger felt real. A hot, childish fury that filled my small chest. In the memory, I saw my own small hand shoot out. It connected with Aaron's chest. A solid push. Aaron stumbled backward. His eyes went wide. There was no railing on that side of the treehouse. Just open air. He reached for something to hold, his fingers scrabbling against the plywood floor. He found nothing. He went over the edge. There was no scream. Just a sudden, shocking silence, and then a heavy, wet thud on the ground below. No, I breathed, the air leaving my lungs in a cold rush. I scrambled away from the puppet on the floor, my back hitting the opposite wall. No, it was an accident. I didn't mean to. The words came out in a desperate flood. A plea to the silent room, to the memory, to the voice in my head. I tripped. I fell into him. It was an accident. I looked at the puppet. Clinker sat there, unmoving, but the voice inside my head was a low, dry chuckle. K-H-I-K-K, H-I-K-K, H-I-K. An accident? Is that the story we told ourselves? The voice was sharp now, a surgeon's scalpel cutting through scar tissue. You hated him, Alex. You hated him because he had the robot, and you didn't. You hated him because his dad bought him things and yours just drank. You wanted him gone. You wanted him to shut up. You pushed him. The memory shifted, became clearer, sharper. The moment before the push. The thought. The dark, ugly little thought that coiled in my gut like a snake. I wish he'd just fall. And I was there, Clinker's voice said, soft and intimate. I was right there with you. I heard the thought. And I agreed. I told you it was okay. I told you to do it. The world tilted on its axis. The entire foundation of my life cracked open, revealing a chasm beneath. Clinker. He wasn't some new invader. He wasn't a curse attached to a box of old junk. He was older. He was from back then. He wasn't an imaginary friend I created for comfort after the accident. He was the part of me that caused it. He was the voice that gave me permission. He was the mechanism my child's mind invented to take the blame. A separate being who could hold the darkness so that I didn't have to. The I that I knew as Alex Evans could remain the good kid. The scared kid. The one who made a terrible mistake. While the other part, the part that wanted and hated and pushed, got a name and a wooden face. Clinker didn't come back a few weeks ago. He had never left. The story I told myself for a quarter of a century, a tragic childhood accident that left me with a quiet sadness, was a lie. It was a carefully constructed fantasy to hide a simple, monstrous truth. I wasn't the victim of a fall. I was the architect of it. A 7-year-old murderer. And all these years, Henderson's petty insults, my boss's dismissive emails, every slight and every moment of feeling powerless. They weren't just bothering Alex. They were poking the other one, the one who doesn't turn the other cheek, the one who knows how to solve problems with a push, or a can of spray paint, or a chef's knife. The shaking in my body stopped. A profound, hollow stillness took its place. The fight drained out of me, leaving nothing behind but the cold, hard weight of the truth. I looked at my hands. The hand that pushed Aaron. The hand with the red paint under the nail. The hand with the K branded into the palm. They were the same hand. My gaze drifted back to the puppet slumped against the wall. His painted smile no longer looked like a threat. It didn't look malicious. It looked familiar, like a family resemblance. I wasn't looking at an enemy. I was looking at a mirror, a part of my own soul, carved from wood and given glass eyes. It's all right. The voice in my head changed. The mocking edge was gone. The coldness was gone. It was warm now, deep and resonant. It felt like my own blood flowing through my veins. It was a voice of absolute understanding, of unconditional acceptance. They all deserved it. Henderson. Aaron. They tried to hurt us. But nobody can hurt us now. Not anymore. My breathing steadied. The knot of fear in my stomach that had been my constant companion for weeks simply dissolved. I'm here now, the voice said, a comforting presence wrapping around my consciousness. Everything is going to be all right. We're together again. We're whole. I looked at Clinker, at his stupid grinning face. He was me. He had always been me. Slowly, deliberately, I nodded my head. The coffee was a splash of sudden heat against my chest. The paper cup hit the floor, its plastic lid popping off and spinning into a corner. A brown puddle spread across the gray office carpet. Oh, Jesus, Alex, I'm so sorry. I didn't see you. It was Mark, from accounting. His face was a mess of apology. He was already dabbing at his own shirt with a napkin. I looked down at the dark stain blooming on my light blue button-up. The liquid was warm, seeping through the cotton and sticking to my skin. A week ago, this would have been a catastrophe. A flash of anger, a muttered curse, a day ruined by a small, stupid inconvenience. My jaw would have tightened. My shoulders would have hunched. Today, I felt nothing. The feeling simply wasn't there. I looked up at Mark. His eyes were wide, waiting for the expected reaction. I smiled at him. A real smile, I think. The muscles in my face moved easily. Don't worry about it, I said. My voice was level. It's just coffee. Mark stared at me for a beat too long. He expected more. Anger, or at least annoyance. I offered him nothing but the quiet smile. He finally gave a nervous laugh, stooped to pick up the cup, and scurried away toward the kitchenette, mumbling more apologies over his shoulder. I watched him go. Then I walked to my cubicle, the damp spot on my shirt already turning cool against my skin. I sat down. The computer hummed. The overhead lights buzzed. Everything was exactly as it should be. Clinker had been right. It was better this way. There was no need for the little flare-ups of anger, not when there were more effective solutions. The morning passed. I answered emails. I updated spreadsheets. I felt a focus I hadn't had in years. The usual background noise of anxiety, the constant low-grade dread, was gone. It had been replaced by a clean, clear space in my head. A space we both occupied now. The summons for the team meeting came at 11. I walked into the conference room and took my usual seat. Mr. Sterling was at the head of the table. He stood, leaning on a cane I'd never seen before. There was a thin, white bandage across his left temple, mostly hidden by his hair. He didn't meet my eyes when I walked in, but I felt him track me as I sat down. His gaze was a physical weight. The meeting started. Budgets. Projections. Sterling clicked through a PowerPoint, his voice a low drone. Then he came to the Q4 marketing initiative. My project. Now, the preliminary numbers on the Hudson campaign are, to be frank, disappointing. Sterling's eyes, cold and gray, finally landed on me. The rest of the team shifted in their seats, looking at their notepads, at the ceiling, anywhere but at me. The engagement metrics are flat. The reach is well below target. Alex, what's the explanation here? The old me would have shrunk. I would have stammered, offered excuses, felt the hot burn of shame creep up my neck. I would have felt small. I didn't move. I kept my hands folded on the table in front of me. I let him finish, hearing the words but not feeling them. They were just sounds. Air vibrating in a room. He limps, the voice in my head observed. It wasn't a whisper, it was just a thought, my thought, but with a different texture. It was patient, amused. We did that. He's pushing his luck, don't you think? He still thinks he's in charge. I looked directly at Sterling. I held his gaze. The campaign is in its early stages, I said. My voice didn't waver. The numbers are within the expected margin for the initial rollout. We anticipate an uptick as we move into the next phase. Sterling's nostrils flared. He wasn't used to this. He was used to me crumbling. The expected margin? I expect results, Alex, not jargon. He really hasn't learned, the voice continued, laced with a cold curiosity. He needs a more permanent lesson. He needs to understand his place. He needs to know who holds the power now. Outwardly, I just nodded slowly. Understood, I said. I will make the necessary adjustments. The meeting ended. I gathered my things and walked out of the room, feeling Sterling's glare on my back the entire way. The feeling didn't bother me. It was information, a data point. It confirmed what the voice was telling me, what we both knew. Mr. Sterling was a problem that had not yet been fully solved. That night, I didn't go straight home. I drove through the falling dark, the city lights smearing across my windshield. I took a left turn, then another. The houses grew larger, set further back from the road behind manicured lawns and brick fences. I knew the way without thinking about it. I parked across the street from Sterling's house. It was a two-story colonial, all white siding and dark green shutters. Every window was lit from within. A warm, golden glow spilled out onto the perfect lawn. A family was inside. A life. I killed the engine. The silence in the car was sudden and complete. I just sat there, watching. The street was quiet. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. A car passed, its headlights sweeping over me for a second before moving on. I didn't slouch. I didn't try to hide. I just watched. There was no fear. The cold knot that lived in my gut for as long as I could remember had been surgically removed. There was no internal argument, no part of me screaming that this was wrong. There was only the plan. A simple, elegant plan. An adjustment. He feels safe in there, the voice said. A calm collaborator. He thinks that door, those walls, can protect him. He thinks his money and his title make him untouchable. He needs to know he's never safe. Not from us. We just need to scare him, I murmured aloud, my own voice sounding strange and new in the car's interior. It was a statement of fact. That's right, the voice agreed. It was like hearing a harmonic of my own thoughts. Nothing too serious. Not yet. Just a little tap on the glass. A reminder that we can get to him whenever we want. That his world is fragile. I watched a silhouette move past an upstairs window. Sterling. I saw the slight hesitation in his step. The way he favored one leg. The limp. My work. A faint smile touched my lips. It was a start. But it wasn't enough. I pulled on a pair of thin leather driving gloves. The fit was snug and sure. I reached into the back seat. and my fingers closed around the smooth, heavy wood of the baseball bat. It was an old one from college. Solid ash. It felt good in my hand. Balanced. I opened the car door. The click was loud in the stillness. I got out, closing the door softly behind me. My feet made almost no sound on the asphalt as I crossed the street. The air was cool, smelling of cut grass and damp earth. A motion-activated floodlight clicked on above Sterling's garage, bathing his black Mercedes in a harsh white light. The car was clean, polished, perfect. An extension of the man himself. I walked up the driveway. Each step was deliberate. I was not a victim being dragged along by a force I couldn't control. I was not a puppet. I was the one walking. I was the one holding the bat. I was the one who had decided to be here. My heart beat slow and steady. This was my will. My action. I stopped beside the driver's side door. I could see my own reflection in the tinted window. A dark shape against the stark light. The bat was held loosely at my side. I looked at the face in the glass. It was my face, my eyes. But they were different now. Clearer. Show him, the voice urged, a final, gentle push. Show him how easily his world can be broken. I raised the bat. The motion was fluid, unhurried. For a moment I held it there, high above my shoulder, savoring the weight of it. The potential energy coiled in my muscles. Then I swung. It was not an angry swing. It was not a frantic swing. It was the precise application of force to a specific point. The heavy part of the bat connected squarely with the side window. The sound was not a simple smash. It was a sharp, percussive crack that echoed in the quiet night, immediately followed by the sound of 1,000 tiny diamonds cascading onto the leather seat and the driveway pavement. A spider web of fractures erupted from the point of impact before the entire pane of glass gave up and fell away. An alarm began to shriek, a piercing, cyclical wail that cut through the neighborhood's calm. Lights started flashing on the car. Red and white. Red and white. I didn't flinch. I didn't run. I lowered the bat, took one last look at the gaping hole in the side of the pristine Mercedes, at the glittering shards of glass. A message delivered. I turned and walked back across the driveway. Calmly. I didn't look back when a light came on in Sterling's living room. I didn't quicken my pace. The alarm screamed behind me. A fitting soundtrack. I crossed the street, got into my car, and placed the bat back on the rear seat. I started the engine and pulled away from the curb, driving at the speed limit. In my rearview mirror, I saw the flashing lights of the car and the dark silhouette of Sterling standing on his front porch. He looked small. I kept driving until his house disappeared from the mirror. I adjusted the mirror so it showed my own face, illuminated by the green glow of the dashboard. My eyes were dark. My expression was placid. A faint curve was forming on my lips. For the first time looking at myself, I didn't see weakness. I didn't see fear. I saw the quiet, clean lines of certainty. I was whole. And we were just getting started. The aftermath of the adrenaline was a clean, level plane. I slept without dreams. The morning came not with a jolt, but as a slow bleed of gray light through the blinds. For a few moments I just lay there, listening to the house settle. There were no ghosts in the corners, no monsters under the bed. The world was solid, factual. The knot of acid that had lived in my stomach for decades was simply gone. The space it left behind was not a void. It was mine. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, a single vibrating pulse. I reached over, my movements unhurried. The screen was bright in the dim room, the light catching the dust motes dancing in the air. A new message. The name on the screen made my thumb pause. Sarah Keene. I had not seen that name in 10 years. My heart rate did not change. My hands did not sweat. I opened the message. Hi, Alex. It's Sarah, Annie's sister. This is out of the blue, I know. My number is probably a surprise. Mom and I are finally getting around to selling the old lake property. The one with the cabin. The realtor said we need a clear statement from you relinquishing any claim, since you helped your dad with the original build. Just a formality. I was hoping maybe we could meet out there sometime this week. Talk it over. Let me know. I read the words twice. They were simple. A business transaction. A loose end from a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. The old Alex would have felt a spike of panic. Shame. A cold sweat. His hands would have started to shake. I felt nothing. Just the weight of the phone in my hand. A surprise? The thought came, not as a whisper, but as a point of clarity in my own mind. It had the smooth, sharp edge of Clinker's logic. No, not a surprise. A move. She's making a move. I looked at the message again. The words seemed to rearrange themselves. Selling the old lake property. The one with the cabin. The place it happened. Meet out there. Talk it over. She always suspected. The thought continued, calm and analytical. She never believed the story. Not really. She was always watching you at the funeral. Her and her mother. Now, after all this time, she wants to meet you there? At the scene? It's not about the land, Alex. It's a trap. She's a risk we never accounted for. It's just a formality, I said aloud. My voice was a low rasp in the quiet room. Is it? The question hung in the air, patient and certain. Why now? Why after 10 years of silence? She has something. Or she thinks she does. She's a thread that can unravel everything we're building. She needs to be handled. My thumb hovered over the reply button. Then it moved to the side, and I deleted the entire message thread. The name Sarah Keene vanished from my screen. The problem was erased. But it wasn't. Deleting a message doesn't delete the person who sent it. It doesn't delete what they know. Or what they think they know. I got out of bed and went to my computer. The chair creaked under my weight. The machine whirred to life. I didn't type in Sarah Keene. I typed in the name of our old hometown newspaper, followed by Annie Prescott death. The search results were few. Local news from a decade ago didn't always get archived well. I clicked on a link to the paper's digitized microfiche collection. The page loaded slowly, a grainy black and white image of a newspaper column. The headline was simple. Local teen dies in tragic fall. I scrolled down, my eyes scanning the fuzzy text. It was all there. The official story. Annie Prescott, 17, slipped and fell from the unrailed deck of a remote lake cabin during a thunderstorm. The coroner's report concluded death by head trauma, consistent with a fall onto the rocks below. A tragic accident. No foul play suspected. My finger stopped the scroll. There was a small follow-up article from a few days later, buried on page C4. Investigation into teen's death continues. Most of it just repeated the information from the first piece. But then there was a new paragraph. The victim's older sister, Sarah Keene, 19, provided a statement to police. Ms. Keene stated she had dropped her sister off at the cabin earlier that evening to meet with a friend, Alex Miller, 17. Ms. Keene told investigators she received a frantic phone call from her sister approximately an hour before the estimated time of death. Through tears, Ms. Keene reported hearing what sounded like a loud argument between Prescott and Miller. She also stated that when she drove back to the cabin out of concern, she saw Miller's truck speeding away from the dirt road access point. Miller was questioned by police but stated he had left the cabin long before the storm hit, after a minor disagreement with Prescott. With no other witnesses, authorities have been unable to corroborate Ms. Keene's account. I leaned back in my chair. The screen glowed. The facts were laid out in stark black and white. There it is, the voice said. It wasn't triumphant. It was matter of fact, like a scientist confirming a hypothesis. She told the police. She tried to point the finger at you then. They didn't listen. But she knows. She's held onto it for 10 years. This isn't about selling land, Alex. This is her trying again. She wants you back at the scene of the crime. Maybe she has a recorder. Maybe she has the police waiting. She is a loose end. A loose end that will hang you. The logic was a clean, straight line. An equation. Sarah Keene was a variable that had been introduced into our new, stable life. A variable that threatened the entire system. And variables needed to be eliminated. My world, the one I was finally building, was orderly. It was based on control. On solving problems. Sterling was a problem. I had begun solving him. Sarah Keene was another. A more complicated one. A more dangerous one. A problem rooted in the past, reaching out to poison the present. The feeling in my chest wasn't panic. It wasn't fear. It was a cold resolve. A sense of purpose. This wasn't a choice fueled by anger or hate. It was a necessity. It was pest control. I picked up my phone again. I went to the recently deleted messages and restored the thread. I typed out a reply to Sarah Keene. My thumbs were steady. Hi Sarah, good to hear from you. The cabin sounds like a good place to meet. Clears the air, you know? How about Friday afternoon? Around 3? My res. I hit send. The message a small blue bubble on the screen. A few minutes later, 3 dots appeared. Then a reply. Friday at 3 works for me. See you then. I closed the phone and stood up. I walked through the house to the attached garage. I pulled the cord and the overhead fluorescent light flickered on with a hum, bathing the concrete floor in a flat, sterile light. My car was there, the one I'd driven last night. The baseball bat was on the back seat where I'd left it. I walked past it, to the far wall where old garden tools hung on a set of dusty hooks. My hand closed around the wooden shaft of a shovel. It was a spade, with a pointed head designed for digging in hard, rocky soil. There was rust on the metal, and the wooden handle was rough, threatening splinters. I took it down from the wall. The weight felt good in my hands, solid. Utilitarian. I carried it over to the car and opened the trunk. I laid the shovel down carefully on the gray carpeted floor, nestling it beside the spare tire. It made a soft metallic thud when I let it go. I closed the trunk. The lock clicked shut with a satisfying finality. A tool for a job. Simple. I drove to work. The sky was a hard, cloudless blue. The sun was bright on the road. I did my job. I answered emails. I updated the spreadsheets on the Hudson campaign. I felt a cool, clear focus. At lunch, I walked to a nearby park and sat on a bench. I didn't eat. I just watched the mothers push their children on the swings. Back and forth. Back and forth. I found myself humming under my breath. An old song, from a music class in elementary school. Row, row, row your boat, gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. On Friday, I left work at 2. I drove home. My movements efficient. I went to my bedroom closet and reached up to the top shelf, behind a stack of old shoeboxes. My fingers found the familiar, lumpy shape. I pulled it down. It was Clinker, not the voice in my head but his physical form, a simple hand puppet I had made when I was 8. A sock, a few mismatched buttons for eyes, a mouth crudely stitched with red yarn. He was worn. The fabric was thin in places. One of his button eyes was loose. He was a relic of a time I was not supposed to remember. A time of secrets. I carried him out to the car. I didn't put him in the back. I opened the front passenger door and placed him on the seat. I pulled the seatbelt across his soft body and clicked it into the buckle. The fit was loose, but it held him upright. He stared forward through the windshield, his stitched smile fixed. A real companion for a real journey. I got in the driver's side and started the engine. I pulled out of the driveway and turned toward the highway, the one that led out of the city, toward the lake, toward the cabin. The afternoon sun was warm on my arm. The hum of the engine was a steady presence. I glanced over at the passenger seat. At the silent, slumped figure held in place by the safety belt. He was just a thing of cloth and thread. But he wasn't. He was the witness. He was the collaborator. He was the part of me that had the answers. We have to be more careful this time, I said, my voice filling the small space of the car. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of intent. No mistakes. No one to see us speeding away. No frantic phone calls. I looked over at the puppet. His button eyes were blank. His red yarn mouth was just a stitch of thread. He was perfectly still. But in my mind, in that clean, clear space we now shared, he was nodding. He agreed completely. This time, I continued, my eyes back on the road, my hands steady on the wheel. We'll do it right, won't we, Clinker? The gravel of the access road crunched under the tires, a sound that hadn't changed in 10 years. The trees, mostly pine and birch, crowded the path, their branches scraping against the sides of the car. I saw the shimmer of the lake through the gaps. It was a flat, metallic blue under the hard afternoon sun. I pulled the car to a stop where the road ended in a small, weed-choked clearing. I turned off the engine. The resulting silence was thick, broken only by the buzz of insects and the distant cry of a loon. I sat for a moment. The air smelled of damp earth, pine needles, and lake water. It wasn't a memory. It was data. Olfactory input. Clinker sat motionless in the passenger seat, his button eyes fixed on the windshield. I undid his seatbelt, the click of the buckle loud in the quiet car. I tucked him under my arm and got out. The cabin was smaller than I remembered. The wood of the porch was gray and warped. A few shingles were missing from the roof, leaving dark patches like missing teeth. To the left, maybe 50 feet into the woods, stood the oak tree. The treehouse was still there, a sagging cube of plywood perched in the lower branches. The rope ladder was gone, replaced by a series of wooden slats nailed directly into the trunk. Some were missing. Others angled downward, slick with green moss. It was a ruin. A forgotten place. The logic was sound. No one would hear anything out here. I walked to the edge of the low cliff where the cabin's deck ended. The unrailed deck. Below, the water lapped against a jumble of gray, sharp-edged rocks. The official story was clean. It was a good story. Plausible. A different car engine sounded in the distance, growing louder. A silver sedan, much cleaner than mine, cautiously navigated the gravel road and pulled in behind my vehicle. The engine cut. Sarah Keene got out. She was thinner than I remembered, her face sharper. Her movements were tight, her shoulders high. She held a large purse like a shield against her stomach. She saw me and stopped. Her eyes flicked from my face, to the cabin, to the puppet under my arm, and then back to my face. A small, confused frown creased her forehead. "Alex," she said. Her voice was steady. "Sarah, you found it okay. I grew up here, remember?" She walked closer, stopping a few feet away. There was no handshake. "That's a new car." "It gets the job done." I shifted Clinker in my arm. "He's Clinker." Her frown deepened. "Right. From when you were kids." "He wanted to come," I stated. It was a simple fact. She gave a short, nervous laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "Okay, well." The realtor sent the papers over. "It's pretty straightforward, just a quitclaim. Basically you saying you have no financial interest in this place." She started to open her purse. "Why now, Sarah?" I asked. The question was Clinker's. Sharp. To the point. She paused, her hand hovering over the clasp of her purse. "What do you mean? Mom and I just... It's time. The place holds too many bad memories." "Does it?" I took a step toward her. She took a half step back. "I don't have bad memories of it." Her jaw tightened. The pretense of business fell away. "Don't you, Alex? Don't you really?" She looked past me, towards the deck, towards the rocks below. "Because I do. I remember getting a phone call. I remember my sister crying. I remember her saying you were yelling, that you were scaring her." And then the line went dead. "We had an argument," I said. The words were flat, rehearsed. "A minor disagreement. I told the police that. You told them. You left. I saw your truck, Alex. I saw you peeling out of here like the devil was on your tail." Her voice was low now, a tremor running through it. "They didn't listen to a hysterical 19-year-old girl. They wanted it to be an accident. It was easier for everyone." "There it is," the voice in my head said, calm as a frozen lake. "The accusation. She didn't come here to sign papers. She came here for a confession. She's a risk. She has to be dealt with. The treehouse. Get her in the treehouse." I was a kid. I was upset. I drove fast, I said, my tone reasonable. I looked over at the crumbling treehouse. "We built that thing one summer, me and your dad. Annie helped paint the inside." Sarah followed my gaze. A flicker of something, maybe confusion at the change of subject, crossed her face. "I remember. She loved that thing." "We should go up," I said, "for old time's sake, see if any of the paint is still there." She stared at the treehouse, then back at me. At the puppet. A line appeared between her eyebrows. "Alex, I don't think that's a good idea. It looks like it's about to fall apart." "It's fine," I said. My voice was gentle. "The main beams are oak. They're solid. It's just a few slats. We can be careful." I started walking toward the tree, not waiting for her reply. I knew she would follow. She hadn't come all this way to stand in a clearing and trade accusations. She wanted answers. She thought she could get them. I reached the tree and placed Clinker gently at its base, propping him up against the trunk so he could watch. His button eyes seemed to follow me as I tested the first slat with my foot. It held. I started to climb. The wood was damp and rough under my hands. I heard her footsteps on the leaves behind me. A hesitant pause. then the sound of her foot on the lowest slat. The inside of the treehouse was dark and smelled of rot and mouse droppings. The floor was littered with damp, brown leaves that had blown in through the single, paneless window. A few crude drawings were still visible on the walls in faded crayon. A lopsided sun. A stick figure of a girl with bright yellow hair. Annie. I stood in the center of the small space. I heard Sarah's breathing as she pulled herself up through the trapdoor in the floor. She stood, brushing dirt from her jeans, her eyes scanning the small, claustrophobic box. She looked uneasy. "See?" I said, my voice soft. "It's still here." "It's a wreck, Alex," she said, staying close to the trapdoor. "We should go. I'll just leave the papers in your car." She was so proud of this place, I continued, ignoring her. I ran a finger over the stick figure drawing. "She told me a secret up here once. She said she was going to tell Mom and Dad about us, about how I'd come over her room at night. She said it wasn't right." Sarah went completely still. Her face was a mask of white. "What are you talking about? She never said anything like that." "Oh, she did," I said. My voice felt strange in my own ears. Higher. Thinner. "She said she was going to ruin everything. That everyone would know what I was. She was going to take it all away. So I brought her down to the cabin. To talk. Just like you wanted to talk today." I turned to face her. I took a step, placing myself between her and the trapdoor. It was the only way out. "Alex," she whispered, her eyes wide with a dawning horror. "What did you do?" "She was yelling," I said, the memory playing out like a film behind my eyes. "Screaming, so I put my hand over her mouth to quiet her. But she kept fighting. She bit me." I held up my hand, looking at the faint, silvery scar on the fleshy part of my thumb. "It was an accident. We were on the deck. She was struggling, and she slipped. She just slipped." "You're lying," Sarah breathed, backing away until her shoulders hit the far wall. "You pushed her." "She was going to tell," I said, my voice now a grotesque parody of a child's whine. "It wasn't fair. I always wanted to know what it felt like," I said, the thought surfacing with perfect, shining clarity. To have everything that was hers. The way everyone looked at her. The way they loved her. I wanted it to be mine. I lunged. It wasn't a roar of rage. It was a silent, purposeful movement. She shrieked, a high, thin sound that was immediately cut off as she tried to dodge. She sidestepped, and her foot came down hard on a section of floorboards near the wall. There was a loud crack, not like a gunshot, but a wet, splintering tier of old wood giving way. The floor beneath her vanished. For a split second she hung in the air, her face a canvas of pure shock. Then she was gone. The entire section of the floor followed her, collapsing downwards. The momentum pulled at me, and I fell too, tumbling through the shattered opening. My fall was broken by a large, dense rhododendron bush. Branches whipped at my face and arms, scratching me, but the thick leaves cushioned my landing. I hit the soft, damp ground with a grunt. I lay there for a second, the wind knocked out of me. Then I pushed myself up. I was scraped and bruised, but whole. I stood and brushed the leaves and dirt from my shirt and pants. A few feet away, Sarah lay sprawled at an unnatural angle. Her fall had not been cushioned. The back of her head had connected with the corner of the same jumble of rocks near the cliff edge, the ones from the story. A dark, wet stain was already spreading out from beneath her hair, soaking into the bed of brown pine needles. Her eyes were open, staring at nothing. Her purse had flown open, its contents, a wallet, keys, a tube of lipstick, and a neatly folded stack of legal documents, scattered around her. I walked over and stood looking down at her. My heart beat at a slow, steady rhythm. There was no panic, no fear. It was a problem that had been solved. I bent down and picked up Clinker from the base of the tree. His yarn smile was unchanged. His button eyes saw nothing. I looked from the puppet to the body, then to the gaping hole in the treehouse floor. It looked like an accident. A terrible, tragic accident. I smoothed Clinker's worn fabric head. I whispered, my voice calm in the sudden deep quiet of the woods. "See, Clinker, another accident." The world settled. The sharp report of cracking wood faded, replaced by the soft whisper of wind through the pine needles. The scent of dust and rot from the ruined treehouse hung in the air. Below me, Sarah's form was a broken shape against the dark earth. Wrong. The angle of her neck was wrong. The stillness was wrong. I catalogued my own injuries. A long scratch on my right forearm, welling with blood. A dull throb in my left shoulder where I'd hit the bush. Bruises were forming. These were acceptable costs. I looked at Clinker, propped against the oak's trunk. His yarn smile was a flat, black line. His button eyes were fixed forward. He approved. The plan had shifted, but the outcome was corrected. A low moan cut through the quiet. It was thin, barely a sound at all. I froze. My gaze snapped back to Sarah. Her head had not moved, but a soft, wet gurgle escaped her lips. A bubble of pinkish foam appeared at the corner of her mouth. Her hand, lying palm up on the pine needles, twitched. A single, spastic clench of her fingers. She was alive. This was a complication, a loose end, a variable that had not been accounted for. She can't be found, Clinker's voice stated in my mind. It wasn't a suggestion. It was an operational directive. Not like this. Not here. They will ask questions. They will find the hole. They will know it wasn't an accident. The logic was sound. I walked back to my car, my movements stiff. The keys were in the ignition. I opened the trunk. The interior was empty except for a neatly folded wool blanket and a short-handled spade with a sharp, clean edge. I had brought it to bury the Clinker doll and the memories he represented, a small ceremonial severing of the past. Its purpose had now been revised. I took the spade and the blanket. Returning to the tree, I knelt beside Sarah. Her breathing was a shallow, ragged hitching sound. I placed 2 fingers on the side of her neck, just below her jaw. The skin was cool and clammy. I felt it, a slow, thready pulse. Faint, but there. Beating. She has to be moved, the voice insisted. Deep. Where no one walks. I unfolded the blanket. It was thick, gray wool. Carefully, I rolled her onto it. Her body was limp, heavier than I expected. Her head lolled to the side, the motion sickeningly loose. I wrapped the blanket around her, covering her completely, creating a crude, lumpy bundle. The fabric would prevent snags. It would collect any blood. It was efficient. I gripped the bundled edges of the blanket near her shoulders and began to pull. The weight was immense. My boots slipped on the loose pine needles. My muscles screamed in protest. I dragged her away from the tree, away from the cabin, past my car, and towards the dense screen of woods that bordered the back of the property. Every few feet I had to stop, my lungs burning, sweat stinging my eyes. The blanket made a soft, hissing sound as it slid over the forest floor. Branches clawed at me, catching on my clothes. I ignored them. I kept moving. The woods grew thicker quickly. The light dimmed under the canopy of leaves. The air grew cooler, smelling of damp soil and decay. I remembered this part of the forest. As a child, I had been told not to go here. There were old pits, dug by hunters decades ago and long since forgotten. Hidden dangers. Perfect. I hauled her another 50 yards, my body a machine of pure physical effort. I saw it then. A depression in the ground, half hidden by overgrown ferns and a fallen log. A small clearing. The pit was about 4 feet across, and perhaps 5 feet deep, its sides eroded and soft. The bottom was a dark layer of old, mulched leaves. It was better than I could have hoped for. As I positioned the blanketed bundle at the edge, a sudden, piercing electronic melody erupted from within the wool wrappings. I flinched, dropping the corner of the blanket. The sound was horribly out of place. A cheerful, upbeat tune that cut through the woods like a shard of glass. It was her phone. It was ringing from inside her purse, which I had inadvertently wrapped up with her. The muffled song continued. A persistent, demanding chirping. A tether to the world I was cutting her off from. A point of failure. Answer it, Clinker's voice said, sharp and curious. No, stop it. Get rid of it. My hands, slick with sweat, fumbled with the blanket, unwrapping one side just enough to find the opening of her purse. My fingers brushed against her wallet, a smooth metal tube of lipstick, and then the hard rectangle of the phone. I pulled it out. The screen lit up the dim forest floor with a clean white glow. The cheerful music poured from its small speaker. Across the screen was a picture of a smiling man with a toddler on his shoulders. Below the picture, the name glowed. Backquote. Hubby. Backquote. The word hung in the air. A life. A whole world contained in that single word, still trying to reach in and pull her back. I stabbed a finger at the red icon on the screen. The music died. The woods were once again silent except for my own ragged breathing. I held the phone in my hand. It felt warm. I drew my arm back, my shoulder protesting the motion, and threw it with all my strength. It cartwheeled through the trees, a small dark object against the green, and disappeared with a distant, hollow-sounding thump. The connection was severed. Now for the final task. I took a deep breath and shoved the blanketed form over the edge. It tumbled into the pit with a soft, heavy impact. I grabbed the spade. As I turned, a sound from the hole stopped me. "M-M-P-H, Alex." Her voice. It wasn't a moan this time, it was a word. My name. Thick and wet, but it was my name. I looked down. In the gloom, I could see the blanket had partially fallen away from her face. Her eyes were open, not focused, but open. They were wide, smeared with dirt, reflecting the slivers of light from the canopy above. She was looking up. Her lips parted, and she made another sound, a weak, questioning whimper. For a second, I stood there, spade in hand. The weight of it felt alien. My heart hammered against my ribs, a wild, frantic rhythm. My stomach churned. This wasn't a bundle anymore. This wasn't a problem to be solved. It was Sarah. Her eyes. She was looking at me. A thought, thin and brittle, tried to form. What am I doing? Finish it. The voice was not a whisper. It was a blade of ice in my skull. Clear, hard, absolute. She saw your face. She said your name. She is a witness. She will tell them. Just like Annie was going to tell them. Ruins everything. Finish it. For us. The hesitation vanished. The churning in my gut ceased. He was right. It was a simple matter of cause and effect. Of survival. My grip on the spade tightened. The handle was smooth, solid wood. I stepped to the pile of loose dirt beside the pit. I drove the blade of the spade into it. The metal scraped against a hidden stone. I lifted the first shovelful. It was heavy with moisture and dark soil. I swung it over the pit. I positioned it directly over her face. Her eyes widened slightly. I tilted the spade. The dirt fell. It wasn't a loud sound. A soft, wet thump hiss as it struck her face and chest. She flinched, a small, convulsive jerk. A choked gasp came from the hole. I did not pause. I worked. I drove the spade into the earth again. And again. A steady, powerful rhythm. The scrape of metal on dirt. The arc of the swing. The fall of the earth. I focused on the sounds, on the burning in my shoulders and back, on the methodical transfer of earth from the pile into the hole. I did not look at her. I looked at the task, at the level of the ground. A few more pathetic, muffled sounds came from below, then nothing. I kept going, shovelful after shovelful. The pile of dirt shrank. The hole filled. I worked until the ground was level. Then I took the back of the spade and tamped the loose earth down, packing it firmly. I grabbed handfuls of dead leaves and ferns and scattered them over the fresh soil, breaking up the outline, blending it back into the forest floor. Finally, it was done. I stood there, leaning on the spade, gasping for air. My shirt was soaked through with sweat. My hands were caked with mud and trembled from the exertion. I looked down at them, at the dirt packed under my fingernails, smeared across my palms. There was no revulsion. There was no sickness in my gut. The frantic hammering in my chest had slowed to a strong, steady beat. The woods were quiet. The problem was solved. The variable had been eliminated. I looked over my shoulder, towards where Clinker was, even though I could no longer see him. A slow smile spread across my face. It felt good. It felt right. "It's finished," I whispered to the empty air. My voice was calm and even. "Now no one can bother us again. The floorboards are cool beneath my feet. 6 months. The calendar on the kitchen wall confirms it. The days are marked off with small, neat X's. My life is a grid of completed tasks. Coffee, percolating. The suit jacket, hanging from the back of a dining chair, free of wrinkles. The city outside my window is a distant, muted hive of activity, 12 stories below. I watch a yellow taxi crawl down the avenue. I do not feel a part of it. I feel like an observer watching a screen. The apartment is clean. The surfaces are polished. A single beam of morning light cuts across the living room, illuminating dust particles dancing in the air. I make a mental note to dust again this evening. Order is important. It is the structure on which everything else is built. I run a hand over the granite countertop. Smooth. Cold. Solid. I check my watch. 7:14 a.m. Everything is on schedule. I pour the coffee into a white ceramic mug. There is no tremor in my hand. There hasn't been for a long time. The memories of the cabin, the woods, the damp earth, they aren't gone. They are simply filed away. They are data points from a previous project, archived and no longer relevant to current operations. The long scratch that was on my forearm is a thin, white line now, barely visible. The ache in my shoulder is a ghost that only whispers on rainy days. Acceptable remnants. I carry my mug to the sofa and sit. The cushions are firm. I pick up the remote. The television flickers to life. A morning news program. Two smiling anchors exchange cheerful banter. I take a sip of coffee. It is hot, bitter. I let the sound of the television wash over me, a featureless drone of information. Weather forecasts. Stock market updates. A segment about a celebrity's new diet. It is all the same. It is noise to fill the silence. Then, a face appears on the screen. A photograph. A woman with a kind smile, dark hair pulled back. The name beneath it reads, Sarah Tran. The male anchor's voice becomes more somber. And we return to a story we've been following for months. The mysterious disappearance of Sarah Tran, a 34-year-old elementary school teacher who was last seen leaving her home for a weekend retreat at a family cabin in the Pine Barrens. I take another sip of my coffee. My heart does not beat any faster. My breathing does not change. I watch the screen with the mild interest of someone waiting for their preferred program to begin. They show a picture of the cabin, roped off with yellow police tape. It looks smaller on the screen. They show a picture of her husband, his face haggard, pleading for information. He looks older than he did on the phone screen. Police have conducted extensive searches of the surrounding woods, the female anchor continues, her voice layered with practiced sympathy, but have so far found no trace of Mrs. Tran. Her car was found parked at the property, but her keys and personal effects were missing. A new face fills the screen, a woman with glasses and neatly styled gray hair. Dr. Evelyn Albright. The caption identifies her as a clinical psychologist and trauma specialist. I remember her. I remember her office. The leather chair that smelled faintly of lemon polish. The questions. I had only seen her 3 times, a mandatory referral after a workplace incident a few years back. An outburst. A broken keyboard. A misunderstanding. Dr. Albright is not talking about Sarah Tran specifically. She is talking in generalities. The network is filling time, creating a segment about the psychology of such cases. In situations involving extreme trauma or a deeply repressed act of transgression, she says, her voice calm and academic, the human mind has a powerful, if frightening, defense mechanism. It can fracture. It can create what we call an alter, or a dissociative identity. I lean forward slightly, an unconscious movement. I place my coffee mug on the coaster on the table. The sharp click of ceramic on wood is the only sound I make. The popular conception, Dr. Albright continues, gesturing with one hand, is that this other self is a malevolent force, an evil entity that seizes control and forces the host to do terrible things. This is a dramatic oversimplification. It's rarely about instigation. The camera zooms in slightly on her face. Her expression is earnest. She is trying to make the public understand. More often the primary personality, the person you know, the one who goes to work and pays their bills, already possesses the dark impulse, the desire to lash out, to remove an obstacle, to commit the act. But guilt, social conditioning, and fear prevent them. The alter doesn't create the impulse. It serves a different function. It gives permission. My gaze is fixed on her. The cheerful noise of the studio is gone. There is only her voice, clear and precise. The alter becomes the rationalizer. It's the voice that whispers, this is necessary. This is the only way. They deserve it. It takes the guilt and absorbs it, allowing the primary personality to perform the act while maintaining a psychological distance. The host can then tell themselves, it wasn't me. It was him, the other one. The alter doesn't drive the car, it just sits in the passenger seat and tells the driver that running the red light is a good idea. A photograph of the woods appears on screen again, a shot of investigators combing through the undergrowth. My eyes drift to the corner of the frame, to the deep dark patch of trees in the background. I know that patch. I know the ferns. I know what lies beneath them. My body remains perfectly still. The segment ends. The smiling anchors return, their faces now appropriately serious. A troubling situation indeed. We can only hope for a swift resolution for the Tran family. They pivot seamlessly to a commercial for a new brand of yogurt. I press the power button on the remote. The screen goes black. In its polished surface, I see my own reflection. A man in a simple gray t-shirt, sitting on a sofa in a clean apartment. The expression is neutral. I look at the reflection for a long moment. Dr. Albright's words are not an accusation. They are an explanation, a diagnosis. And in that clinical truth, there is a certain comfort. It was not chaos. It was a procedure. I stand up. It is 7:28 a.m. Time to get ready for work. I move through the apartment with methodical purpose. Shower. Shave. I select a navy blue tie from the rack. I knot it perfectly. The dimple below the knot cinched just right. I slip on the tailored suit jacket. I look in the full-length mirror by the door. Alex Weaver, account manager. A man who looks like he has his life in order. The image is flawless. I pick up my leather briefcase, lock the apartment door behind me. A solid double click of the deadbolt. In the hallway I pass my neighbor, Mrs. Gable, retrieving her newspaper. "Good morning, Alex," she says with a frail smile. "Morning, Eleanor," I reply. My voice is warm. My smile is easy. I press the button for the elevator. We exchange a few words about the weather. The performance is effortless. It is a second skin. The elevator arrives with a soft ding. I step inside. Mrs. Gable does not join me. "Have a good day," she calls as the doors begin to slide shut. The doors meet in the middle with a soft whoosh, sealing me inside the small stainless steel box. The lights are bright, humming almost silently. I am alone. I face the polished steel doors. My reflection stares back at me. Alex Weaver, in his sharp suit. For a moment, nothing happens. Then, I watch as the mouth in the reflection changes. The polite, neighborly smile dissolves. The corners of my lips pull back slowly, deliberately. It is not a grin of joy. It is a wide, predatory crescent. It is a smile of pure, unadulterated satisfaction. My eyes in the reflection are cold, bright points of light. They hold the stare of the man looking at them. There is no conflict. There is only accord. Slowly, I raise my right hand. In the reflection, the other Alex raises his left. I give a small, jaunty wave, a familiar greeting to an old friend. The reflection winks. The elevator stops. The doors slide open. The smile vanishes from my face, replaced once more by a mask of professional neutrality. I step out into the lobby. The doorman nods. I nod back. The day has begun. That evening I do not turn on the television. The apartment is quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator. I take a bottle of scotch from the liquor cabinet, a good one, aged 12 years. I also retrieve 2 crystal tumblers. They feel heavy and substantial in my hands. I walk to the high-backed armchair that sits in the corner of the living room, a mate to the one opposite it. I place one of the glasses on the small end table beside the empty chair. Then, I go to my bedroom closet. On the top shelf, behind a stack of old sweaters, is a canvas bag. I pull it down. From inside I retrieve him. Clinker. His yarn hair is flattened on one side. His button eyes stare forward into nothing. The black thread of his mouth is a flat line. I smooth his hair, brush a piece of lint from his checkered shirt. I carry him to the empty armchair and set him down, propping him up against the backrest so he is sitting upright, facing me. He looks small in the large chair. I return to the liquor cabinet and pour a generous measure of scotch into each of the 2 glasses. The amber liquid catches the light. I place one tumbler on the table in front of Clinker. I take the other and sit down in my own chair, facing him. For several minutes I just sit there. The silence in the room is not tense. It is comfortable. It is shared. Finally I lift my glass. The crystal chimes softly as I nudge the rim of the other glass, the one sitting before the doll. "To us," I say. My voice is low even. "To our friendship." I bring the glass to my lips and take a long, slow sip. The scotch burns its way down my throat, a warm, spreading fire. I lower the glass and look at the doll across from me, at the button eyes that see everything, at the stitched mouth that keeps all our secrets. There is no more struggle. There is no more doubt. The problem has been identified, and the solution has been implemented. The system works. The monster was never in the closet. The demon was never in the doll. It was always here. And it is finally at peace. That is the only horror that ever mattered.